or talking about how women fare off in divorce when women fare off far worse financially after divorce than men and are less likely to repartner. Yes, that is.
Women fare worse?
Yeah, men fare off worse psychologically, but women are more likely, their standard of living.
Financially?
Yes, their standard of living goes down. They're more likely to be in poverty, seek government assistance. Please look this up. Men are more likely to suffer alcohol use, unalive themselves, get sick, like all of those things. So psychologically, men fare off worse after divorce, but financially, women fare off worse. Please look.
Well, that's just wrong on its face.
Why is it wrong on its face?
It's just wrong on its face because when it comes to faring worse, men overwhelmingly pay child support and alimony.
Yes, but the woman's standard of living still goes down after divorce, and the man's is less likely to. That's why I'm saying look it up. So
yeah, but that's not clear to me if that's them faring worse financially.
They're more likely for their standard of living to decrease after divorce. They're more likely to seek government assistance, more likely to be in poverty. Like child support, you mentioned it. I think only like 20-something%. Like it's not like everyone who's ordered to pay child support does. In fact, the majority don't. So
the majority don't pay child support.
I think
I'd have to look that up.
Look that up. I'm not gonna. Yeah, but you can also look up the divorce stuff I'm talking about. That is.
Well. Speaking of child support, I mean, it's one of the ways in which we still have debtors' prisons, which doesn't exist for other kinds of debts.
What do you mean? Like.
Well, almost men exclusively. If you don't pay child support, you're likely to be thrown in jail.
Well, they're gonna garnish wages before they do that.
Also, child support payments from women to men are going up. It's not gendered.
They're going up, but I mean, it's still insignificant.
Again, the rules, the laws are gender neutral.
Lauren, you wanted to come in on something?
Not that I remember, but I have opinions about child support. How would you all feel about child support being determined based off like mandatory paternity testing, as well as actually having to, I know I've heard a lot of men complain about their child support not actually going to the child, like needing, I guess, better documentation, more transparency in terms of the child support payments.
I'm fine with that.
Valid.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, I think it makes total sense. Yeah.
I think that in the same way, like with SNAP benefits, food benefits. You okay?
Empty. I'm going to get one.
Okay. There should be a limitation on what you can spend with child support. Like if you have SNAP benefits, you have food benefits, you can only buy food with that card. So I think you should only be able to. You can't go get your nails done.
It needs to be for the child.
It needs to be dedicated for the child on a credit card, a card issued by the court or something.
I mean, I think also the point of child support is because like the person who's paying the child support isn't like watching the child all the time. Like they're seeing them maybe one or twice a week at the most, a lot of times. So I think, and sometimes they just don't see them at all. Like someone who's very close to me. So I don't really think, I mean, I think it all kind of evens out. I mean, I do hear the argument and I don't even necessarily disagree with it, but I just think if you're primarily watching and taking care of the child and you spent $1,000 on them that month, but then their $200 child support card, you like got gas with it or something that wasn't necessarily directly correlated to the child, it's still like you spent the $1,000. So I think it kind of like evens out. But I mean, I also don't disagree with.
So can you do things like gas? Like how exactly?
I mean, I think if it's indirect, like obviously if you have care of the kids, you're going to be driving around and things like that. And I think something like a card or even a joint bank account where you can both monitor purchases, I think would do a lot to bring more transparency to something.
It would just be really hard practically. Let's say you spend $100 at Target. All the statement shows is that you spent $100 at Target. Are we supposed to? I mean,
when we itemize for business expenses, we have to keep our receipts. I don't think it's unreasonable for like if you're using that money for something to just keep a receipt.
I think as long as we can take that burden off of the single mom who already has a billion other things to worry about, than to also have to add this additional hurdle. I think if we can eliminate that, then I'm for it. Because it's really hard to keep. I mean, yeah, I run a business. You may run a business. Mm-hmm. It's not easy. And I mean, you and I probably make enough that we can delegate it onto our CP. Like single moms, a lot of them aren't in that position financially to be able to do that. So I just want to make sure that whatever policy you're trying to advocate for won't have a huge burden on those. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really know what the minutia of that would look like, but I do remember what I was going to say regarding you guys talking about whether women fare better or worse in divorce. I think there's a difference between saying women tend to fare better financially in the divorce terms than men, while also recognizing that after the fact, a woman is more likely to do worse financially compared to when she was in the marriage, which I think is what you two are disagreeing about what you're actually talking about.
Yeah, so this idea that women are just getting divorced because they want all this money when they tend to actually do, and that's one of the reasons I think college-educated women and people with more resources are more likely to initiate, because I think for a lot of women who don't have their own resources, one of the reasons maybe they don't get divorced is because they know that their standard of living will inevitably decrease.
I mean, but if the man's the breadwinner and she wants a divorce, wouldn't it stand to reason that you no longer get access to the benefits of that partnership?
It depends. Like if gave up a career and everything, and they have this system where it's like, I will be the breadwinner and you've given up your career to raise the kids. I think this is why these rules were implemented in the first place. It's like, okay, because you did that, we don't want, do you want to leave women like that high and dry? A woman who's stayed home, raised the kids, raised 3-4 kids, and then the guy runs off has an affair and runs off, she should be left with nothing?
Well, I think that's why we used to not have like no fault divorce, is because those kind of situations, it does matter how the marriage ends. Obviously, if a woman is married to someone, she invests, her youth, her livelihood, taking care of the kids, taking care of him, and then he, does her dirty basically. It's very different than if a woman is just, for example, a trophy wife, doesn't work, doesn't have kids, and then she wants to divorce him. So like I'm for.
Do you think the majority of divorces are these trophy wife situations, or do you think divorce is super hard for both sexes no matter the circumstances, and people aren't just doing it willy-nilly to get a paycheck, especially when we're seeing, at least statistically, it doesn't seem like women are getting this paycheck unless you're using, Melinda Gates as an example. It's not the reality for most women, and I don't think people should be forced to stay in a divorce unless the government has like, okay, you were cheated on and you have to prove it. Like that's just going to open up
well, we're not just talking about staying in marriage. We're talking about whether he might actually have to pay to support her. So obviously it's like,
so you're saying he should only have to pay to support her if there's a reason. If there's two people and she's home taking care of the kids, he's off. Let's say he didn't cheat, but let's say they're just like, hey, this isn't working. I'm really unhappy. You're really unhappy. We're arguing. Let's get a divorce. She shouldn't, even though she gave up all those years raising the kids, she shouldn't get anything out of that.
I guess it depends on who files for divorce. Yeah, absolutely. I think alimony as a concept has been really overused, and I think that's a lot of the reason why young men especially are hesitant to get married, is because for a lot of men, they don't see any benefit from it. You're just putting yourself at a disadvantage. If someday she could say, you know what, I'm not really feeling this anymore, I'm going to divorce you, but you're still going to be responsible for paying for me for the rest of your life.
Like I said, I'm pro prenup, and alimony is not gendered. It's literally a formula in most states. And so in a situation, I do think like, yeah, if a man wants to get married, you should think about this. You should think about this possibility. But I don't think that it's fair that a woman who has given up so much in order to be a homemaker shouldn't have any shouldn't have anything. She should just be left on the street like afterwards. Well, if she's unhappy in that marriage.
Well, there's a difference between saying, hey, let's look at what our assets are currently and what we've invested in together, versus and kind of split that however it may be, versus going forward, let's have continued payments. So there's a difference there. There's a difference between saying, hey, we built this together even though I was at home, so let's do some sort of split, versus I should be entitled even going forward to some of what you
think whatever assets they have in the marriage at the time should be split, but it shouldn't be future payments. So you're just against alimony. You're not against asset division.
Depending on the circumstance.
Okay. I think that it, again, depends on the circumstance, and I do think courts generally do. That's why alimony payments have gone down in general. But I do think that courts do look at, okay, what was the dynamic of this? And they do come to an equitable decision usually. And again,
the courts come to equitable decisions when it comes to
so this is another thing you guys so this is another thing you guys constantly.
That's not true at all.
Yes. What do you mean?
Men constantly get in situations where they're in terrible situations when it comes to alimony and child support.
So just because they're more likely to make more money, but if it's a situation, like I said, it would be a constitutional, nightmare if there was actually judges or courts that were, or there were laws on the books that separated men and women. It's a formula. You go to most divorce courts, it's a formula. Okay, who makes this, blah, blah, blah. We put it in. Okay, this is how if it's a community property state. I mean, there's a whole lot that goes into this. None of that's really gendered. And this is something you guys, I think a lot of people in this space also mess up on, is they're like, oh, the courts have a bias towards women. They're usually giving custody. That's just not true. Over 80% of custody agreements are decided by the parents outside of court.
There's a huge bias in the court system.
No, this is what I'm trying to explain to you. So when we look at child, can I finish this though?
Go ahead,
so another 11% is decided in mediation where the parents decide. Then another whatever percent is decided after a custody evaluation by the parents. Only 4% actually go to a judge. And actually, the farther up you go off this this conflict pyramid, the more likely it is that the father actually does get custody. And another thing is, courts don't like to give people things they don't ask for. When a woman wants primary custody, she's 80% likely to file the appropriate paperwork. Fathers are 40%. That's double. So that's another reason you see that discrepancy. But the reason that people are like 80% of custodial parents are mothers, that's because that's what the couple is agreeing to. It's not because the court is making that determination.
Well, under threat of lawsuit,
what do you mean?
You can come to a settlement agreement, like two couples, for example, when it comes to custody dispute, when it comes to alimony, etc. You can come to a settlement, but that doesn't mean that both parties are satisfied with said settlement.
Well, I would tell a guy who wasn't satisfied, because a lot of times, like I said, 80% of the time, the judge is just signing off. This hasn't gone to court. The parents are agreeing, hey, you should keep the child. And a lot of times that's because the mom is generally
the financial ramifications of it actually proceeding into in front of a judge, and you're having to make arguments in front of a judge. It's catastrophic. Also because if the man's the breadwinner, not only is he obliged to pay for his own legal, his own counsel, he has to pay for it for his wife. So the's a double impact there.
So do you think that's
drag
the reason,
on,
or do you think it's more likely the case because it's generally true that even in a two-parent household, the mother is the default parent. The mother is the one that generally is the one taking the kids to soccer practice. It would disrupt the routine usually for the man to become all of a sudden the primary caregiver. But again, men who do fight for custody do end up getting it. So
they need to fight for it though, whereas the
mother, the father's they're usually agreeing because it makes most sense for the family. So you can't, if men want it, they should fight for it, and they do get it when they fight for it.
I suppose.
Okay.
But the issue is that you have these really just catastrophic awards for child support and alimony, which are not even approaching proportional to what is. I think when it comes to alimony and child support, it shouldn't matter what your income is. It should basically just be some state guideline. Hey, if you want to get a divorce, this is the maximum you're eligible for.
So you think there's a cap? I don't disagree with that. I don't think people should be getting millions of dollars in alimony.
We saw Kevin Costner, who actually here in his divorce proceedings, our studio is in Santa Barbara County. Santa Barbara County is overlooking Kevin Costner's divorce, and the wife wanted $250,000 a month in, I don't know if it was child support, spousal, alimony, some combination. They ultimately ended up awarding, I believe it was $120,000 a month in support to the wife.
Yeah, so if you look at
that's ridiculous.
I agree with you, but that's not the norm. That is a very unique, these that's why I don't use the example, well, Kelly Clarkson is paying her husband, because these are exceptions.
Yeah, but on a lower level, men are also getting fleeced in the same sort of way.
I don't think that, at least the data doesn't indicate that men are being fleeced in this way. I do believe that there should be a cap. I don't think that people should be getting hundreds of ththousands of dollars in alimony or child support, because I agree with you there, but that doesn't mean I believe that it shouldn't be a thing in general, especially child support. You guys don't think people should pay child support? Do you think? I mean,
I believe in child support because it's not the child's fault. The child shouldn't be penalized for whatever their parents are going through. What I would just want to ensure is that it's being used transparently. Like you said, that there's a cap, that it's not being used as some sort of way to subsidize a mother's lifestyle, which is a whole different thing that shouldn't conflate with the child support. So
Yeah, I agree with that.
Well, let's move on from this topic. I need to get through some chats. We have Triple F here. Hey,